on the news.
It is important for our scientists to get to the bottom of this.
Progress being made why the Department of Energy believes COVID-19 came from a lab in China. Tragedy on the ocean. Dozens killed after a migrant ship sinks off the coast of Italy. Then this.
This is going to be one of the most important features of the Church of the Future.
Music to our ears, how Black history and culture is being incorporated into St. Joseph's church music. And responding to criticism, the EPA reassures Ohio residents that the toxic train spill will be cleaned up properly. I'm Christine Persichetti. Current News starts right now. The Department of Energy says a lab leak in China is to blame for the COVID-19 pandemic. This more than a year after the FBI came to the same conclusion. But there's still a lot of debate over the origins of this deadly virus. It's been just about 3 years since the world shut down because of the coronavirus pandemic. And now the Department of Energy is weighing in on its origin, saying COVID-19 most likely came from a laboratory leak in China.
There is a variety of views in the intelligence community. Some elements of the intelligence community have reached conclusions on one side, some on the other.
National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan did not confirm the intelligence, which was first reported by the Wall Street Journal on Sunday. But the Energy Department's findings carry a lot of weight since the department, which runs a network of national labs, is known for its scientific expertise.
President Biden specifically requested that the national labs, which are part of the Department of Energy, be brought into this assessment because he wants to put every tool at use to be able to figure out what happened here.
U.S. government officials have been divided over whether the pandemic was caused by a Chinese lab leak or emerged naturally from the wild, which other intelligence agencies have concluded. The entire intelligence community has noted repeatedly that a lack of cooperation from Beijing has made it difficult to get to the bottom of the question of where COVID-19 originated. This assessment comes as Republicans on Capitol Hill have been pushing for further investigation into the lab leak theory.
Whether it came from a lab or came from animals, is that the Chinese were very, very slow in alerting the world to it. It only came out from bits and pieces from scientists and doctors within China, and by then it was too late.
The Department of Energy made its determination with low confidence, which suggests its level of certainty is not high. Leaders of the intelligence community are set to brief Congress next week as part of annual hearings on global threats, and they'll most likely be asked about the origins of the virus. We have a developing story of tragedy off Italy's coast. A boat of migrants looking for a better life crashed after smashing against rocks. Over 60 people, 12 of which are children, including a baby, died when the wooden boat broke apart. You're looking at the debris that washed up on the shores of Calabria. Later on, crews tried to find more survivors in the water once it was daylight. The hope for survivors is grim, and there's a chance we'll see more tragedies like this. Barbie Latza-Nadeau has more.
They're not expecting to find any more survivors in this latest tragedy. You know, 14,000 people have made it across the sea to Italy, migrants, refugees, making this very, very dangerous route, very dangerous journey in this year alone, 2023 alone. So this is just one more disaster. You know, one of the big questions now, though, is how many dead are there? They just don't know how many people were on that boat. 180, we've heard reports, maybe even as many as 250 people. Of course, migrant boats run by human smugglers don't have passenger lists. Nobody knows for sure how many people might be dead here.
That was Barbie Latza-Nadeau reporting. The Catholic Church quickly stepped in to show the utmost respect for the lives that were tragically lost. Priests seen here gave last rites over the bodies that were recovered. It's believed that the migrants originated from Pakistan, Afghanistan, Iran, and Somalia. Pope Francis also mourned the news of this accident, speaking of it at the end of his Angelus.
Per ognuno di loro, per I dispersi e per gli altri migranti sopravvissuti. Ringrazio quanto hanno portato soccorso e coloro che stanno dando accoglienza.
He prayed that Mary would support those helping in the disaster. Over in Washington, the Supreme Court is debating debt as two cases challenging President Biden's plan to cancel thousands of dollars in student loans comes before the justices Tuesday. Karen Kafa details both sides of the arguments and what the public can expect from the highest court in the land.
In limbo for months, President Joe Biden's federal student loan relief plan will have a turn before the U.S. Supreme Court Tuesday. Last August, Biden unveiled a sweeping plan to forgive up to $20,000 in federal student loan debt for borrowers whose income was less than $125,000 a year.
All this means people can finally crawl out from under that mountain of debt to get on top of their rent and their utilities.
Supporters lauded the move as a big step forward to ending a college debt crisis compounded by the COVID-19 pandemic. And the Biden administration said among borrowers no longer in school, nearly 90% of relief dollars would go to those earning less than $75,000 a year. Republican critics called it political landing as the 2022 midterm elections entered the home stretch and argued writing off an estimated $430 billion in repayments should get congressional approval. In December, the Supreme Court agreed to take up two challenges to the plan, including one from 6 GOP-led states, Nebraska, Arkansas, Iowa, Kansas, Missouri, and South Carolina, while keeping a block imposed by an appeals court last November in place. Millions of borrowers have been notified they're approved for debt relief. No debt has been canceled yet. The Biden administration's case leans on the post-9/11 HEROES Act of 2003, which granted the U.S. Secretary of Education authority to make changes to the federal student loan program during national emergencies. But the White House intends to end the COVID-19 national emergency on May 11th, which may make that argument more challenging.
In Washington, Karen Kafa, Currents News.
Millions of people may soon be booted from Medicaid. Some 84 million people are covered by the government-sponsored program. That number was heavily inflated during the pandemic when some 20 million people joined and the federal government forbid states from kicking people off. Now, for the first time in 3 years, states are checking everyone's eligibility, meaning as many as 14 million people could lose access. It's music to the Catholic Church's ears. These are the roots of worship, a community of parishioners merging culture and faith. At St. Joseph's Church in Jamaica, you can feel the Caribbean beat and African heat all year long. That's because the choir has designed it that way, helping people pray to the beat during Mass every Sunday. Currents News' Jessica Easthope caught up with the music director who says it's changed his relationship with God.
Once Kevin Robinson's hands hit the keys, he's taken back in time to his childhood, growing up in a Pentecostal church, watching the congregation around him dance and clap. But he also goes back much further to the origins of black music used in worship.
When we're able to truly be ourselves with our music, our traditions, our cultures, that's true worship.
In the present, Kevin is now a Catholic and the music director at St. Joseph's Church in Jamaica, Queens. He leads the choir and musicians, picks all the music, and prays a lot about his decisions.
Daily, I'm asking God to allow me to be an open vessel for His word, His message.
Drums, bass, and a tambourine set the stage for praise, with African and Caribbean influence incorporated into even the most traditional pieces. Parishioner Sophie Zekpa, who moved to Queens from Togo in 2006, says she feels at home at Mass.
I always clap my hands, enjoying myself. I love worshiping. I like the way it is now.
The presence of black music at Mass has been a priority for Pastor Father Chris Piasta.
With the black community, you have two important components, the word and the music. If one of them is not good, we're going to let you know.
Father Chris says cultural music at Mass is the way of the future. At his parish, it's all about having the sound of faith reflect the community.
It's all about community, where 2 or 3 are gathered in His name. It's no longer a nice thing to have. It is part of everything.
And for Kevin, connecting the past and black history to the future of worship allows God to be present in every note. In Jamaica, Jessica Easthope, Currents News.
All month long, Currents News in the Tablet has been bringing you Black History Month coverage. In the paper, we've celebrated by looking at the past, such as this story about Harriet Thompson, the woman credited with starting the Black Catholic movement in the U.S. The present, marking celebrations that combine faith and culture in the Diocese of Brooklyn, and the future, with stories like how this school is taking Black History Month beyond February. And you can see all those stories and more by going to the paper's website. That's thetablet.org. Catholics in Los Angeles are preparing to say their final farewells to a beloved auxiliary bishop. Bishop David O'Connell was murdered in his Hacienda Heights home more than a week ago. Since his untimely death, memorials for the prelate have been pouring in, from in-person vigils outside his home to a new digital memorial created by the Archdiocese of Los Angeles, asking Catholics to pray and commit an act of kindness in honor of Bishop David. In just a few days, the Archdiocese will be holding their final services for the auxiliary bishop. A memorial mass will be held Wednesday, March 1st at St. John Vianney Catholic Church in Hacienda Heights. That was the parish Bishop O'Connell has served for the last 7 years. On Thursday, March 2nd, a public viewing will take place at the Cathedral of Our Lady of the Angels, and at the same location will be the funeral on Friday, March 3rd. Currents News will be on the ground in Los Angeles. Our own Jessica Easthope and Michelle Powers will be covering Bishop O'Connell's memorial mass and funeral mass. Plus, they'll have exclusive coverage on how the late auxiliary bishop changed the streets of Los Angeles. That'll be from Wednesday to Friday, right here on Currents News. Hundreds of people throughout the Diocese of Brooklyn will be welcomed into the Catholic faith this Easter, and this weekend they took a big step in their journey.
Thanks be to God. Say it with me. Thanks be to God.
In both Brooklyn and Queens, a rite of election was held. The time-honored tradition takes place on the first Sunday of Lent and signifies that those who are to be baptized during the Easter Vigil have been chosen or elected by the church. Those people are called catechumens, or people who have never been baptized but are making a conscious decision to join the Catholic faith. Bishop Brennan presided over both services on Sunday, welcoming 164 catechumens in Brooklyn and 217 in Queens. The church also welcomed candidates, which are people who have been baptized into other Christian faiths but wish to become Catholic. Easter will look a lot different in Nicaragua as the government there continues to crack down on the Catholic Church. The country's president, Daniel Ortega, has forbidden people to publicly celebrate the Stations of the Cross. That means during Lent and on Good Friday, the prayers will take place inside churches and not on the streets. As if that's not bad enough, bishops are being accused of, quote, grave crimes of horrors. All of this is happening after Bishop Rolando Alvarez was sentenced to 26 years in prison, and over 200 political opponents were deported to the U.S. There's a lot more news headed your way. Lingering concerns in Ohio, how the government is trying to reassure people after a toxic train derailment. Escaping through dance, how a young Ukrainian fled her war-torn country through ballet. And ever feel like someone's watching you? How the Virgin Mother is inspiring Romans from afar.
It's the Mother Church of Queens County and one of the most diverse.
When I came here, I said, the whole world exists in my parish.
And one parishioner is helping to preserve the past for the future.
That's the history of the parish.
Juanita Martinez is the pulse of the parish at Our Lady of Mount Carmel in Astoria. Tuesday, right here on Currents News.
Pope Francis is planning his next trip. The Holy Father announcing Monday he'll visit Hungary at the end of April. During the 3-day journey, the pontiff will meet with refugees and the poor. Hungary has accepted hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians who fled following the Russian invasion. Hungary is just one of many nations that Ukrainians have run to. That's according to numbers by the United Nations, who say some 8 million people have fled Ukraine. As of the last few weeks, the countries topping the list for most refugees recorded is Poland at more than 1.5 million, then followed by Germany, the Czech Republic, Italy, and Spain. Experts call it the largest migration of refugees in Europe since World War II. And unlike other recent conflicts, the Ukrainians have largely been met with sympathy and help. That includes a young Ukrainian ballerina who has found refuge in New York City. While she's performing pirouettes, her family and her home are struggling in a war zone. But as Andy Madison reports, dancing is saving her and other ballerinas like her in more ways than one.
This New Jersey dance studio is where Yiva Gredzak finds refuge from a war raging half a world away. As the Ukrainian ballerina will tell you, keeping her focus on dancing is the only distraction from the fact that her family remains back in her home of Dnipro, Ukraine.
As soon as I'm in ballet, I'm trying to escape this world. So I'm going more into something unrealistic, I would say. So when I'm dancing ballet, I'm just enjoying the moment and I'm imagining that I'm somewhere in like fairy tales.
Yiva says she left Ukraine to pursue a ballet career the day before Russia invaded her country. She remembers getting a phone call from her mother a year ago, asking her not to return home for her own safety.
That was the moment when I realized that I don't know when I can see them.
She was finally able to journey back home just 2 months ago.
I knew that it's not safe. I knew that there is always a risk. But for me, it was very important that I did this step and I saw with my eyes what's going on in my country.
Her city, scarred by war, was hardly recognizable. What she did recognize, her father's smile as he spotted Yiva through her train window.
Living was the hardest. Living, it was like, you never know when you can come back and you never know when you can see your family again.
Yiva calls New York City home at the moment, where she was placed in a ballet academy by former Bolshoi ballerina Lavisa Shavaliev. She founded Youth America Grand Prix after defecting from Russia in the early 90s. The organization scouts out rising star dancers, offering them scholarships for academies around the world. When Russian troops advanced on Ukraine, Shavaliev shifted her focus to evacuating dancers out of the war zone.
We send an email to all of our partner schools with a profile of the kids and say, guys, that's the young dancers, and we have to get them out as soon as possible. And all the schools was like, absolutely.
Shavaliev says over the last year, YAGP has helped more than 250 Ukrainian dancers leave their country. 11, including Yiva, are continuing their training in the U.S.
We will just try to deal with the situation how best we can, you know. Nobody get a memo how to place ballet students in the middle of the war. At least I didn't, you know.
Yiva's hope is that her grace and success on an American stage will help carry her family through another year of Ukraine's conflict.
Just leave and you don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. And then you just dance and then you just like floating in a different world.
That was Andy Madison reporting. Going into the second year of the war, Shavaliev expects to place more dancers in the U.S. Their group has received additional funding to help in their efforts. You better watch out and get those gloves from the back of the closet as snow is in the forecast for New York City. The Big Apple is bracing for its biggest snowfall this winter as 3 inches of snow is predicted Monday evening. Northern suburbs are expected to be hit harder, but temperatures tonight will be in the mid-30s, ensuring the snow will be more pretty than problematic for New Yorkers. From snow warnings to health concerns, the EPA is trying to help East Palestine families in Ohio by conducting health surveys and giving them information about the derailed train that caused a chemical spill. Isabel Rosales explains how fear still lingers in the community.
The cleanup and removal of contaminated soil continues from the site of the train derailment in East Palestine, Ohio, from February 3rd. The U.S. Environmental Agency is assuring residents that all the toxic waste will be disposed of in a, quote, safe and lawful manner at EPA-certified facilities.
One thing that's been made clear to me is that everyone wants this contamination gone from the community. They don't want the worry, and they don't want the smell.
A White House official says members of the Federal Emergency Management Agency, EPA, and the CDC began distributing informational flyers and conducting health surveys over the weekend. According to the official, their goal is to reach 400 homes by Monday.
What we need to come to grips with is the idea that
more safety metrics, more rules and regulations, and perhaps some laws, and need to be passed quickly.
Last week, the National Transportation Safety Board released its preliminary report on the investigation. It concluded that the wreck was 100% preventable. Meanwhile, President Joe Biden currently has no plans to visit Ohio. On Friday, he defended his administration's response to the crisis.
I had a long meeting with my team and what they're doing. You know, we were there 2 hours after the train went down, 2 hours. And so the idea that we're not engaged is just simply not there.
The EPA is scheduled to hold its next public meeting for residents on March 2nd. I'm Isabel Rosales reporting.
People of East Palestine, Ohio, and neighboring areas are in need of your help. Catholic Charities Diocese of Youngstown is partnering with local parishes and townships to provide services and resources through donations. If you're able to give anything, go to ccdoy.org to find out how you can help. Still to come on Currents News, hidden works of the Virgin Mother, why so many depictions of Mary are tucked away in parts of Rome. Do you have a story idea or want to share a tip? Email us at newstips@desalesmedia.org or call our 24-hour number, 718-517-3122. We'll be right back. Ever look around for a signal from God? Well, in Rome, locals only need to step out their front door to be greeted by an image of the Blessed Mother. And as Andy Madison finds out, these holy icons have been blessing Roman streets for centuries.
These little statues and icons of Mary can be found tucked in alleys, on street corners, and hidden in remote passageways in Rome.
There's a wonderful tradition in Rome called the Madonnelle, which are these images generally of the Blessed Virgin. And so these are little ways of bringing literally the Blessed Virgin to the streets and to the daily life of the Romans.
Dr. Elizabeth Lev says their origin comes from Rome's Etruscan ancestors.
It's an evolution of something that was once a nameless, faceless protection of a fear into understanding a guiding hand, that we are part of a plan, that there is someone who watches over us. So it shows a sort of a growth and a certain maturity in how to confront the uncertainties in the path of our lives by putting them in the hands of someone who we understand and who we know understands us, like the Madonna.
But the comforting nature of the Madonnelli extends beyond their physical presence. A Roman tradition says that in 1796, with the impending French invasion, about 30 Madonnelli began to make eye contact with people below, as a sign that Mary would protect them. In the 18th century, there were around 2,600 Madonnelli lining the streets of Rome. Though there are only 500 left today, Dr. Lev says they are still important.
Some of them, they have a little inscription underneath it offering, why don't you say a Hail Mary? Just don't forget to salute Maria, Ave Maria, say a little Ave to Maria. So they do have a function today, they do have a relevance today, but I think it's an age where we are so busy walking down the street looking at our screens that we don't look up for guidance. We look for guidance here, but we stop looking for guidance there.
Rome's Madonnelli may be declining in numbers, but if the flowers and candles people leave with them are anything to go by, there may be more people seeking guidance than we thought. Andy Madison, Currents News.
And that is Currents News. I'm Christine Persichetti. Thank you for joining us, because we are putting your faith in the news. Hope to see you again next time.